Hello and welcome to House and Home Chat, Real Estate Real Talk with Dena and Chris. I'm Dena Mathis.
And I'm Chris Breitenbach. Hey, today we are going to discuss those things that happen behind the scenes in between writing your purchase contract and getting to the closing table.
Yeah, and today we're talking with Rick Wilson about one of those things. He's an account executive with Residential Title Company, and we're going to be discussing title searches, how they're done, why they're important, and that age-old question that we always get is, do I need title insurance when I'm purchasing a home?
Absolutely. After that, when we are in the Real Talk portion of our program, we're going to be talking about the trends in the greater Cincinnati market now that we officially have said goodbye to summer and we are into fall.
And I'm feeling it too. Are you guys?
Cold today.
Yes,
It's
just
like
got
a
cold.
light just switched and it got chilly, didn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
here we are, we're into fall.
So Rick, welcome to our program. We appreciate your being here.
Thanks for joining us, Rick.
Yes,
Why
thank
don't
you.
we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Rick Wilson, and I'm with Residential Title. And I've been in the title industry since 1999, actually with a law firm. Started as a title runner for the law firm, but then I progressed into doing closings for the company, and then over time, basically got into the title insurance part of it with Residential Title. So that's been since 2014 with Residential Title, and loving it ever since.
Love
So,
it.
Yes.
And that's our small business shout out for the week, Residential Title and Rick Wilson.
Yes, absolutely. So like a title company is one of those things, right? They're just this entity.
Yes.
Mhm.
What is a title company? What do they do?
Yeah. Tell us what the title company does.
Basically, the title company does the title searches so that your clients can get to the closing table. So the ultimate goal is to get to the closing table, but it's the boring part in between the contract and the closing. So it's a necessary process to get to the closing table.
So a title search, like you said, is a necessary process then.
Yes.
And what is a title search?
So
I'm
the-
going to get really basic.
That's fine. That's fine. So the title search basically begins with when you have a purchase contract, you have a buyer and a seller, and the seller basically they search from the title prior to when they owned it, and if anybody owned it before them, they search that person's name. So they go back in the history of the title of that property. Typically 40 years is a title search.
Wow.
So it's it can be very involved. Depends on how many transactions have taken place over the course of 40
How many
years.
owners?
Mhm.
Okay.
And it is based on, so whoever owned it,
Mhm.
and if they got married after that, we'd have to search that person's name as well. So
Wow.
it's basically a search that makes sure that there's no liens against the property and that everybody who owned it basically transferred their interest to the next person. So
Got it. So
Okay.
basically that the owners, not just now, but along the way, have been real owners of the property, have transferred it correctly, and that they've had no liens against their property.
correct.
And you go back, you mentioned this 40-year thing. So why is that the magic number or?
That's a great question, and I don't know.
And does every title company, is it that the same?
That's a good question as well. Not
Okay.
every title company does a 40-year search. Some title companies, depend on the cost of that company, they do what's called a current owner search. So it could be just as back as 2 years,
Oh, really?
6 months, 5 years. So that is why when you do a title search, we do a 40-year search because I guess at some point there was a cutoff for the statute of limitations.
Oh, okay. So
So
maybe
maybe
that's
that's
where
what it
the
is.
40
Could
came
be.
from. That sounds
That would make
logical.
sense.
Yeah.
That would definitely make sense. So does every home sale purchase have to go through a title search?
I would say yes, but it depends on the buyer.
Okay.
And they do, and I think what's one of the questions going to come up is basically who chooses a title company.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
in our market in Cincinnati area, the buyer chooses the title company. And basically it's between the title company and the real estate company to make sure that the title company is chosen.
Okay.
I think that the agents can choose it, but it's ultimately the buyer's choice.
Okay.
The buyer's choice, because the buyer ultimately is making the purchase, and so they're securing their investment. Is that why?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That does make sense. It's
Yeah.
their purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Is there ever a scenario, or can the buyer and the seller have different title companies? Because I know we run into that when we're doing relocation properties a lot.
Yes, they can have buyer representation and seller representation, but I just look at it this way. It's very involved when that happens.
Mhm.
Too many hands in the pot can kind of,
Yeah.
muddle things up.
Yeah.
So it's always best to have the one title company handle it, but it doesn't.
But it can happen like
Correct.
seamlessly, I
Yes,
guess. It's
yes.
just a little more involved.
More
maybe.
involved, yes.
Mhm.
So.
Got it. Got
Mhm.
it. So let's say I'm selling my house to my child.
Mm-hmm.
Do I still do a title? Do I still need a title company and a title search?
I would say yes.
Sorry,
I would
put
say-
Rick on the spot.
Are you selling your home to your child?
No, my child doesn't want my home.
I would say
wondering.
yes. I would say yes, just because when you did the search for your property,
Yeah.
the company
Yeah.
may not have seen the prior history. So
Well,
it's always
that-
best to
to
have.
do a search then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up a point then. What if something is missed? Like, whose responsibility is that? And what if you find out something was not captured?
Okay, so the title search basically is done by a human being at the county.
Not a robotic.
Nope. So
Okay.
a human can make errors or
Okay,
mistakes or
okay.
miss things. So when the search is done, basically the title company is hiring that title examiner to do the search for them. And I believe they have errors and omissions for
Okay.
themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
But ultimately, the title insurance policy would help protect the owner in every instance when that comes up.
Okay. Well, that leads into title insurance.
Yeah. So then, exactly. What is title insurance?
Okay,
then?
so title
Good
insurance,
segue.
it's a good segue. Title insurance is a policy for the lender or the owner that protects the interest in that property to that company or to the buyer. So typically, the lender will purchase an owner's or a lender's policy, but it's at the cost of the buyer, and that protects that lender's investment up to the loan amount.
Okay.
So people think, well, why does an owner have to have owner's title insurance if the lender's paying for it? Well, they're not paying for the owner's policy. They're paying to protect the lender's interest in the loan.
So there are two different policies, and I think
Correct.
that often comes up and is confusing because when a buyer is working with a lender and they're looking at all of their fees and such, the title insurance comes up on there.
Yes.
But they don't necessarily understand that those are two different policies, is what you're saying.
Yes. So whenever I talk to a potential buyer who's going to look into purchasing owner's title insurance, I always tell them, look at the cost of what the owner's policy is going to be if the lender's getting it as well, because there's what's called a simultaneous issue, and they're not paying the full premium when they're getting an owner's policy, because if the lender is paying for the policy, they're already paying a portion towards their owner's policy. So it makes it much less expensive for them to
So
get
it's more
it.
affordable to
More
get
affordable
it.
to get
Okay. Okay.
So when you look at the cost overall, see if the lender is getting a lender's policy,
Mhm.
and if they are, then it just makes sense for them to get the extra protection for themselves.
Explain that extra protection then, and
So
what
then-
that
so that
does
makes-
for the buyer then.
So what it does is basically protects them up to the purchase price of the property
Okay.
Okay.
instead of just up to the loan amount.
So when you say protects them, so I buy a house, it's $350,000. We find out, or we come to find out that, I don't know, there was a lien that wasn't removed? Is
There
that
wasn't a lien, there
typical
wasn't,
scenario?
there was a scenario, let's just say that a previous owner was married, but the
Oh.
spouse, they got divorced, and the spouse did not get their interest in the property, but they had somebody else sign on their name on the deed to say that they transferred the title, but they didn't. So
Things like Things like that happen?
Yes. So,
Wow.
yes. So basically
you
that,
sound like you're talking from experience.
so basically that previous owner could come back and say, I was never given my interest, and now
Okay.
they're going to
Got it.
sue you.
Okay.
And-
You are now the homeowner.
Yep.
3 years later, somebody comes back and says, I have an interest in this property. And then they're coming after the current homeowner.
You got it.
Got it.
Okay. So what does that policy, again, how does that policy
So if they
protect them?
if they have an owner's policy, the policy pays for attorney fees
Okay.
Okay.
and up to the limits of the policy. So any
Okay.
claims against them,
Okay.
it's up to the limits of the policy.
So it's just like any other insurance. You hope to
Yeah.
God you don't ever need it, but
Yeah.
you thank God that you have it if you do, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Hey, without sharing any, because, I'm very sensitive to privacy issues, without sharing anything that would be a disclosure issue, can you share maybe some other scenarios that people might encounter? I'm just trying to help people get,
Yeah, to
because the
understand.
whole title in general is, again, one of those
Yeah,
vague,
yeah.
and perhaps that's why a title company
Yeah.
to do a title search is, a vague concept to a lot of people.
Right.
So,
There are a lot of things that can come up in a title search and after the fact.
okay.
So if somebody was given the property due to an estate, an heir
okay.
to a will,
Mhm.
they were named in a will, but they didn't get their interest paid to them. There are
Okay.
other like a foreclosure. So a foreclosure happens, basically the lien that could have been removed didn't get removed.
Okay.
So there's many things that off the top of my head I can't think of. But
Yeah.
Can I share my
yes,
story?
please do.
So with my story on my current home, we closed on our sellers closed on their home 10 days before we closed on our home. Okay.
Mhm.
Seller closed on their brand new home
Right.
and got a mortgage on the new home 10 days before we closed on ours. When we went to refinance on the second or third time we went to refinance, it came up that their mortgage for the new house
Oh.
was on my home.
Oh.
And so we actually had an issue with closing because I had this extra mortgage on my house. For us, fortunately, we knew our sellers quite well. It was the matter of a phone call. They have a personal relationship with their lender.
Mhm.
Everything got taken care of within 24 hours. But had they not made their payments, right?
Mhm.
Had they not been reachable,
Right.
So that would be an issue. I guess that's where attorneys would get
Yes.
involved.
and
is
I'm
what
like
you're
thinking
saying.
even attorney's fees would
Yeah.
have cost
Yeah.
me
Yep.
Yeah.
money to
Right.
get it
Exactly.
resolved.
Exactly.
So there are things that people may not necessarily think of, because when they ask, like, what am I protecting myself from, and then they know that the title company, like you said, is going back 40 years
Mhm.
to check the title, but there sounds like there could be a million and one
There's-
things
This,
that
right?
could,
Just an
yeah, that
innocent
you
thing.
can't
Yep.
anticipate.
Thank heavens
Yes.
we were just
Yeah.
refinancing. If we
Yeah.
were selling,
Yeah.
Right.
that could have held up a closing
Yeah.
Yep.
easily
sure.
until it was resolved.
There's also things that can cover is when something gets recorded in the wrong county,
Oh.
Okay.
which happens.
So there are
which,
clerical errors, like you
Clerical
said,
errors,
we're
yep.
human beings
Yep.
and things.
which you would
are-
think, how could that happen when you're presenting a document to the county auditor or the
Mhm.
recorder,
Yeah.
and they may miss it as well. So it's like,
Mhm.
this county is not, they don't know what county, it could just be, clerical or typographical error on
Mhm.
that document to make it look like it's supposed to be that county, but it's a different county.
Got
Okay.
it.
So,
Yeah, there are a lot of different
Yes.
things that could go wrong, basically after the fact, and that's where title insurance is important.
correct.
How about, okay, so we talked about owners and going back one owner, over time, 40 years, or several owners rather.
Mhm.
But what if it's a brand new home? Like, what if it's new construction?
Somebody owned the
Good question.
land before the house was constructed.
Okay.
So, same thing. You go back in history to see who owned that property prior, and if it wasn't transferred correctly, or if it was, parcel numbers split out
Mhm.
Mhm.
because of the separation of the land. So there's people owned it before it was built. So,
okay, so
always,
the land too.
yep, can be searched as well.
Mhm.
So just like the property.
Well, and I'm thinking with new construction, mechanics liens always
Mhm.
comes into my thought. A mechanics lien would be if a bill's not paid properly, one of the recourses of the contractor
Yeah,
is to put a lien on a property.
there's a certain well-known scenario or builder here in the area, I think, that made those
In the
kind
mid
of,
90s, yes.
yeah, that
yes.
made
Yeah.
those, I want to say the word popular, but that made those, I guess,
Issues.
necessary,
Yes.
more necessary,
Oh,
I
yeah,
guess,
yeah.
considered more necessary. So,
Yeah, so because we do get those questions, right?
Right.
The other question I get is if it's a cash transaction.
mhm.
And to me, a cash transaction, absolutely, I encourage my clients to get title insurance.
Yeah.
Yes, because they're paying all that money up front.
Yeah,
And even though the lender, typically would have a lender's policy, it still doesn't protect the owner. So they're giving up all their cash, and for one little typographical error.
I like how you said that. All their cash.
all their cash.
So yes, they could basically be losing a lot of money.
So is it, okay, so my life insurance, right? I get a bill,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, twice a year. With title insurance, is it recurring? Do I have to renew it? What happens with that?
It is a one-time fee at the closing table, or if they decide to get it after the closing, they have up to 30 days to get that. But if it goes after 30 days, there's typically the discount from the lender. So how we talked about before,
Right,
the lender
right.
and the owners together. If it's just a lender policy, or I'm sorry, if it's just the owner's policy with a cash sale, 30 days.
Okay.
But after 30 days, there would be what's called an update search done on the property to make sure nothing happened prior from the time the search
Okay,
was
so that
ended.
would cost more because then they have to update it. So actually that's a component of it that I think I never really quite understood, is that somebody who doesn't close or who doesn't purchase it at the closing table, but wants to purchase it, let's say 30, let's say 45 days, let's say 60 days later, does that still cover that? There's an updated search and it would cover them from the time of ownership then?
Yes, except for the fact if something did pop up from the time the commitment was given to them and the time they purchase it, that would not be insured against.
Okay.
So it's always to their advantage to get something at
Right
the closing
away.
table.
I
I call
makes
it peace
sense.
of mind at the closing table, because once you leave,
Mhm.
how
Yeah.
often are you going to think about owner's policy?
Yeah.
You
Right, you're done. You're planning,
You're done,
you're
you're
moving
moving
in,
in, you're decorating.
you're decorating, you're in your new
All the
home.
exciting good stuff.
All the
Yeah,
good
and that
stuff.
really gets pushed to the wayside for sure.
And that way, if you include it in the closing cost, it doesn't seem like it's a high cost to pay after the closing is done.
Well, speaking
So-
of cost, tell us a little bit about how that's determined, and is it the same across the board with all title companies?
Title insurance policies are state mandated
Okay.
fee, so the insurance amount won't change.
So it doesn't matter.
But the
from
cost of the services varies throughout the tri-state. So one title company could be $350 for closing and title exam. Another title company could be $450 closing exam. But typically we're comparable to the title industry in the area. But you also get what you pay for.
So does that 40-year thing come into it, like as far as like how in depth the search is, or are there other things that you get what you pay for?
With other title companies, I don't know what their rules are as far as the searches go.
Right.
They could be a current owner search. Whether that title company is going to disclose to them, hey, we do a full search, when they may not be doing a full search, I don't know. But we do know that there are certain companies that don't do full searches. And I do know that we typically catch issues that when they are buying, somebody prior didn't catch because we went back 40 years.
So it could have been something that was several transactions behind that you're now catching because
of
your
title company.
thoroughness.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Interesting. And I always makes me think about my representation, and I have this fear that I'm going to have a seller who didn't use me and wasn't encouraged to get title insurance when they were buying, who now goes to sell and has an issue. right? Couldn't that happen?
That could happen.
Yeah. Moral of the story
Yes.
is. So
If you were
Go
going
ahead.
to talk about the cost of it,
Yeah,
so
Yeah.
typically the owner's premium starts out at $175 minimum, and that's up to $30,000. After that, it starts going up incrementally, however you say that word, and it's $5.75 per thousand.
mhm,
So I did the math already. Up to 150,000, it's basically $5.75 per thousand.
mhm.
So after that, it starts to decrease in the amount, but it's never less than $5.50 or something per thousand.
Okay.
So it's pretty affordable when you look at the overall cost that you're getting and the
Mhm.
benefit of that.
And like you said, if it's built into the sale
Mhm.
and you're paying those closing costs, it can just kind of come out of all
And
the
it is a
proceeds.
one-time
And it's a
fee,
one-time fee. That's a
and
good
it
point.
covers you and any person that has an interest in that property, even if they've given it to somebody else,
Mhm.
Okay.
like an heir. So it's not like it
Okay.
has to be transferred again,
Mhm.
and it's covered whoever has an
Mhm.
interest in that property.
Those are some, I mean, we've really uncovered some things I knew and some things that,
Yeah.
I didn't know, but that brings up a lot of good points about what a buyer should be asking a title company. And oftentimes they don't even know who the title company is that's doing the search. Somebody
Mhm.
else
Mhm.
makes those decisions. Are there any other things that come to mind that, a buyer should be asking or making sure
I would
about the
ask,
title company?
I would tell your clients to ask them if they're doing a full 40-year search.
Okay.
Because if not, then they
It's
may
not
have
worth a
issues.
darn.
You got it when they go
Right.
to sell.
Yeah.
They will
Yeah.
have issues, and then they're going to be calling that title company and say,
Yeah.
what? And they're going to say, well, you didn't purchase an owner's policy. So
Right.
the one thing I was going to say about the owner's policy is if you have a policy and you are going to sell, something comes up between the process of closing that could cause it to have problems at the closing
Mhm.
table.
Mhm.
Having the policy usually will allow the attorneys between the title companies to talk to each other and say, look, here's the policy we have, insure over that because
Okay.
we insured over it. So it's kind
Mhm.
of like one of those things that, it kind of gets passed along.
Right.
And it
Okay.
helps the closing process get to the closing table sooner,
Yep.
as opposed to lengthy days into the
Yeah.
trying to fix it up.
How long does the title search typically take then?
Good question. We like to have 5 to 7 business days.
Okay.
Reasonable.
Seems reasonable. Yeah.
Reasonable.
However, you have agents out there that hold onto their contracts that say, can we get this title done in 2 days? No, we can't. We have what's called a rush title order, and it just, all that does is bog down the people that had titles already in process.
Right.
But yeah, typically 5 to 7 days, and then 7
Well,
to
who
10.
can close faster than that? Even with
Right.
you got a cash transaction. I get
Right.
that, but there are a few hoops you got to jump through.
Mhm.
Oh, well, but I
That take
could
a week.
see, right, making sure
Yeah.
that you've gotten through parts of your loan process
Right.
before you do your title search.
Yep.
Like, is it, if there's something that might come up in the loan process, like
happen
even getting
before the
through an
search is
inspection
done.
period, if you're
Yeah.
doing inspections,
Yeah. Good point.
it might just be held for that reason.
What I'll say to that is residential title, we like to do the title searches well in advance.
Mhm.
Even if the contract cancels, we don't charge anymore.
Oh, well, that's a good
Okay.
perk
Just-
too.
Good thing to
because
know.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be the reason you'd hold up the title search.
Right.
Is basically making sure, checking those boxes to ensure that
Mhm.
you were moving forward with the
Right.
transaction. So
Yes.
that's a great point. And I don't know that I knew that either. Thank you.
So yeah, we definitely we try to give us more time than trying to rush everything at the last minute.
Yeah. It doesn't pay to rush
No.
things at the last minute,
No,
does
it
it?
does not.
Are there any other parts of the process that the title company handles?
The title company will handle the clearing up the title issues.
Okay.
Mhm.
So if there are, let's say, said names that are in question. So
Right.
for example,
Okay.
I'll give you my name. So it's Richard Thomas Wilson, but I took title is Rick Wilson. So the name check basically will cross check any Richard, any name to begin with a Thomas or a T.
Uh-huh.
So those things could hinder the process, but you always want to make sure that the person who is maybe a federal tax lien against is not bringing that to
Got
the
it.
next property.
So
The process is basically the names have to be sent to the state of Ohio, and they're typically of 7 to 15 business days turnaround time. So that is why we like to get the title work ahead of time, because if we have those issues, now we have 2 more weeks that we still have to wait for the state to do something.
And if you want to meet a closing date, if you got that title work happening early, you can probably still meet your closing date.
Exactly.
And is that why they're signing off at the closing, that they are the aliases, I guess, that
they're not the name.
The names that have been found. Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know too.
Yep.
Perfect.
Is there anything else that we haven't touched on? I mean, I think we've really hopefully explained why title insurance is a necessary part of the transaction. But is there anything else that we haven't really touched on?
Not really. I mean, covered a lot of it.
It can be confusing.
And deep subject.
I think.
It is very in depth, and I always say this too, and I know you've heard this before, but title is boring, but yet it's necessary. To some can be boring.
Well, hopefully we haven't been boring today.
Right. So
we've filled our viewers and our listeners with a lot of great information. And we really thank you for joining us today.
So shout out to Rick Wilson, Residential Title. We appreciate your being here.
Thank you guys for having me.
Sure. Can you tell everybody how to find you, locate you?
If you would like to call me, my phone number is 513-368-4891. And I cover the Central Regional Office, the Union Center location, and for now, the Ohio, Indiana location.
Fantastic.
Great. We love it. And as you know, if you're watching YouTube, Rick's contact information can be found at the end of our program.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you, guys.
And a final thank you goes to Rick Wilson of Residential Title, who is our small business shout out for the week. Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, I appreciate Rick, right?
Yeah.
Sharing such wonderful information. Just want to tip the iceberg to give you something to think about.
Exactly. And no matter how many times you transact business, there's always something new to be learned.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate him here. So moving on to the Real Talk portion of our program, we're looking at the real estate trends as we transition from the summer months to the fall months. So Chris, what are you seeing or experiencing right now in the marketplace?
I'm seeing a little bit of a transition, and seasonally we're used to a transition at this point of the year where things might slow down a little bit. Maybe, and even though there's a lot of compelling market trends still going on, I'm kind of noticing a little bit of, I'm going to call it a hesitation, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good word for it. I would say hesitation is a good word, because I don't want to, say it's a shift or a trend just yet.
Right.
But I would say in the last couple of weeks, at least, week or two, as we look at 1 week and then the next, there is a little bit of a hesitation with days on the market. It's just a little bit longer.
And maybe not that 24-hour, right? Our sellers are expecting houses to go under contract in 24 hours. You know what? I'm noticing a 2-week trend, and where they are sitting. And I think it's I have buyers, and I'm sure other people do, who are like, I'm not going to jump on this immediately, and maybe I want to process it.
Right, and that's interesting, because we are showing, or we're seeing price reductions. So things are staying on the market longer. I think, did you pull up the price reductions?
I did. So, again, we love to pull some stats for you, but one of the things,
local Cincinnati statistics.
Yeah, one of the things we did was did a 7-day look back, and in that 7-day look back, we found that there are 754 new listings. So that's interesting, right? 140 that went back on the market. So
Yeah,
those are listings that went under contract and are now back active.
That's
So
significant.
that's a huge number. And 328 price reductions.
Yeah, that's
so
significant too.
So it kind of lends itself to the fact that homes aren't going under contract immediately. They are on the market for just a tad bit, making it compelling to just take that little twitch, whether it be significant or just a mild one, to get homes where they actually need to be.
And showings haven't necessarily decreased. I think they're trending upward.
Right.
So that's interesting to note too, is that there's still plenty of buyer pool out there. They're out there, they're looking, but they're not necessarily all bidding on that first house that they go through.
It could be.
So I don't know. It's interesting, like you said, the
not
shift.
Necessarily the need to win
versus
finding the right house. And Dena, you did some research looking at
I was looking
some of
at
those changes too.
Looking at the active inventory on the market, and so just looking at the month of September, like basically the first half or the first couple weeks in September, the actives, and this isn't new listings, but the actual active.
So the inventory. What's sitting.
Exactly.
Not sitting, but
was only 310 active listings.
Wow. Okay.
And the pendings were at 813. So a lot of pendings, obviously not very many listings. But then looking at the second portion of the month, that active inventory actually went to 504. So we have more homes that are active than they were the weeks prior.
Hopefully giving people a choice.
But there were also more pendings, which makes sense as, more homes sold. So there were about
1,000. If you have more homes to choose from, there's more opportunity to buy a home.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of where the market was during the month of September as far as the active inventory goes. And obviously, looking at that 7-day look back shows it just a little bit of a tweak, maybe.
Yeah, that 7-day look back, we saw that there's just a little over 700 pendings, right? So 712 pendings, and you compare that to 754 new listings. And then the back on markets, which almost brings us to a 900 mark for some opportunity. As a buyer, right?
Yeah, for sure. So
I'm kind of thinking, I guess I have a couple of messages. First, if you're a seller, right, if you're looking to put your house on the market, maybe we need to adjust those expectations of, hey, my house is going to go under contract. I'm going to have 50 showings and my house is going to go under contract in 5 hours. That might not necessarily be the case. And maybe that's not a bad thing.
Right. It was displacing a lot of people, obviously. There was not the opportunity, I think, you had to make quick decisions.
Right. And if you make quick decisions, 140 of those come back on the market.
Yeah, exactly. So not to say that things are slowing, but there's just been a slight shift.
And I'll be interested to see where we go over the next couple of weeks.
Exactly. And I think another, just point is keeping your finger on the pulse. We keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on daily, weekly. And that's where it's really important to consult with a trusted realtor.
Right.
And for you to be looking at the trends as they are playing out in time, and not necessarily what happened with your friend's house during the month of June or July, because real estate is always shifting and changing. And, it's.
And the ones that you hear about, the people who are talking, are the ones who have the good story to tell, probably.
Not the bad stories.
Right.
Where their house reduced.
And there are pockets, right?
Yeah.
We've talked about this before. There are pockets too that I'm seeing moving at a slower pace than maybe some other areas.
That's a great point too. And that's, again, where really consulting with your realtor about what's happening in your community, within your neighborhood, what the active competition is for, your particular listing that you're thinking about putting on the market. All these things are very timely, and these conversations are really vital.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, hey, we would love to help you with this market, whether you're buying or selling. Let us do the groundwork and the understanding of the trends and what they're doing. And the best thing is you need a personal strategy for how you're moving forward, and we can help you with that personal strategy.
I think that's all that we have today, right?
Yeah, so thanks for joining us. This is House and Home Chat, Real Estate Real Talk with Dena and Chris.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.